My name is Eliza Vorn. I'm 31 years old, and I woke up in complete darkness 3 weeks ago, buried under dirt in a box with just enough air to panic. I know how insane that sounds, but you need to hear the whole story before you decide what's real. I've never believed in the afterlife, curses, or anything beyond the veil. I was raised to think death was the end and that cemeteries were peaceful. That's why I took the job, a living caretaker at Merrifield Cemetery in North Carolina. The ad said free room and board, $300 weekly, minimal tasks. Sounded like easy money and solitude, which I honestly needed after losing my brother in a car crash last fall. The place was old, beautiful, and a sad Southern Gothic way, iron gates with angel statues, giant oaks that leaned like they were eavesdropping, and gravestones so worn you could barely read the names. There was one real handwritten in the contract: do not enter plot 13 after midnight. I left. When I saw it, thought it was some creepy tradition to scare off kids. But on my third night, I heard humming coming from the far end of the cemetery around 12:43 a.m. Soft, childlike repeating. I followed it, flashlight in hand, across wet grass and uneven stones, until I reached plot 13, a row of graves that looked recently disturbed, fresh dirt, no headstones, and in the center a cross made of two sticks tied together with red string. The humming stopped the moment I stepped past the iron boundary arch. I don't remember what happened next, just flashes, the scent of rain even though the sky was dry, the crunch of something snapping under my foot, and a sudden cold that gripped me like hands from below. I woke up, gasping for air in total blackness, with my arms pressed tight against my chest, skin scraped and mouth full of earth. I screamed. I thrashed. Something wouldn't crack above me. A thin beam of dirt fell into my face. I was in a box, buried, but not alone. There were scratch marks around me, and carved into the side of the coffin were the words, "I borrowed your name, you can keep the rest." I don't know how I got out, just that I ran until my lungs burned and collapsed on the road just outside the gates. The police didn't believe me. The grave was gone, the ground smooth. But that night when I checked my ID, something was wrong. The name on it wasn't mine. It said Mara Vorn, and beneath it, scratched across the laminate, were the words, "Return to soon." So please, if you're watching this, like, share, and subscribe before my name fades completely, because the truth is, I'm not sure I ever came back alone. I didn't sleep after I escaped the grave, not even for a second. I just sat on the floor of the caretaker's lodge, lights on, every mirror covered, every curtain drawn, with the ID card in my hand, and the name Mara Vorn staring back at me like it had always belonged there. The worst part, it wasn't just the ID, it was my driver's license, my work badge, my old student card from college. Everything now said Mara, and all the photos, though still my face looked slightly of F, like Maya's, weren't quite mine anymore. Desperate to anchor myself in reality, I called my sister Claire, who lives in Seattle, the only person left who would even care if I disappeared. And when she picked up, she paused a second too long after I said, "It's Eliza," and responded with, "I'm sorry, who?" I hung up. No one forgets their own sister, not unless something has been rewritten. The next night, I heard the humming again, same time, same soft, airy melody coming from the same direction, plot 13. But I didn't go out this time. I couldn't. Instead, I stayed inside and locked every door, and that's when I noticed the full-length mirror at the end of the hallway. The only one I hadn't covered. I swear it hadn't been there before, and it was fogged up from the inside, not like condensation, but like breath. I stepped toward it slowly, my fingers trembling, stomach twisted into a knot of dread. And what I saw nearly made my legs buckle. My reflection was in copying me. It wasn't delayed, it was completely independent. I stood still, frozen in place, but my reflection kept moving. It reached down and dragged something across the floor, a shovel. It was digging slowly, methodically, throwing invisible dirt behind it while staring up at me with a face that looked like mine, ought to pale eyes to wide, and mouth twitching like it wanted to scream, but didn't have permission. Behind her, behind me, was the inside of the grave again, wood and earth in a second, cross-tied with red string, and then the reflection stopped digging. It looked at me, tilted its head, raised one hand, and pressed it against the inside of the mirror. A message formed in the fog like it had been written from the inside with a fingertip. "She's not done yet." I screamed and threw a blanket over the mirror. but I could still see her shape through the cloth, still moving, still digging. I don't know who she is. I don't know why she took my name, but something in my blood says she's not finished, and if I don't stop her, she'll come back wearing my face, holding my ID, sleeping in my bed, and no one will even remember Eliza Vorn ever existed. I knew I had to find proof, anything that could ground me in reality, again, something physical that confirmed I still existed and that I wasn't losing my mind to some grave-dwelling hallucination. So I broke into the cemetery's records office at dawn, a dusty room behind the chapel with warped floorboards, cabinets that moaned when you touched them, and a locked drawer labeled deaths pre-1909. Rusted shut from disuse, or maybe intentional neglect. I pried it open with a crowbar I found under the stairwell and dug through brittle parchment and mold-stained books until I found a bound volume wrapped in twine labeled MV. And there it was on the second page. Mara Eliza Vorn, born 1880 to died 1908, buried in plot 13C Merrifield Cemetery, and scrawled next to it in red ink, almost too faint to read, was the word premature. My mouth dried as I read the report. Attached a faded medical certificate from a local doctor claiming Mara was pronounced dead after a fever-induced coma, but was later discovered to have resumed breathing 3 hours after burial. The page ended with a chilling line, "Recovery unknown, grave left undisturbed." I stared at it, heart pounding, breath shaking, and noticed something even worse. On the back of the document, a sketch. Someone had drawn the symbol from the grave. The red-stringed cross beneath it was a sentence written in the same pen: "Those who return must replace." That night, I went back to the caretaker's cabin, numb, barely holding the idea of reality together, and found every mirror uncovered despite having taped blankets and newspapers over them the day before, and in every reflection she stood behind me. Mara, my face, but older, pale as a corpse, pulled from the earth, lips cold in a permanent grin that wasn't human. I screamed, backed into the kitchen, but her voice followed me through the walls, not as a whisper this time, but as a full sentence that rattled the windows and made the refrigerator hum in harmony. "You dug me up, now dig your own way down." And then I noticed something else stirred under my fingernails. Again, my shoes caked in fresh soil, my jacket ripped like I'd led through thorns, but I hadn't gone outside. I hadn't left, or maybe I never came back that night. The humming returned, louder now, not just a soft lullaby in the wind, but a full chorus, layered voices calling out a tune I somehow remembered, but couldn't place, like something sung to me in a crib long before I understood language, and it wasn't coming from the cemetery anymore. It was coming from inside the house, crawling through the floorboards, seeping through the wallpaper, echoing through the radiators, and whispering up from the drain in the sink. I tried to run, but the front door wouldn't open. It just stared back like another mirror, and when I looked into the glass panel, it didn't reflect the hallway behind me. It showed a fresh grave, a crowd of people in black, and a priest reading something. I couldn't hear his mouth moving in reverse. I screamed, stumbled back, then spun around to find the back door suddenly open wide, leading not to the porch, but directly into the middle of Merrifield Cemetery. Even though the cabin was nearly 200 yards away, I stepped through like I had no choice, like gravity had rewritten itself. The night was heavy and the sky felt too low, like it was pressing down on the trees. The air smelled of wet soil and old flowers. I crept toward plot 13 and stopped dead in my tracks, because there they were, 6 people in long black coats, faces I didn't recognize, and a coffin closed, lowered carefully into the earth. One of them, an old woman with milky eyes, whispered something as she tossed a handful of dirt onto the lid, and I swear I heard her say, "Now she can rest, the name has been returned." I stepped closer. No one looked up, no one acknowledged me. I screamed, waved my arms, nothing. It was like I didn't exist. Then I saw the tombstone, freshly carved, still wet, and on it the name Eliza Vorn, born 1993, died yesterday's date. My knees gave out. I crawled forward in disbelief, hand trembling as I touched the cold stone, and then I saw her across the graveyard under the crooked oak. Me, or what used to be me, Mara, wearing my face, standing tall, watching with a twisted smile. Her hands were clean, her posture command as she turned to walk toward the house. I saw something moving inside her reflection in the window, my real body screaming and pounding at the glass from inside. I had been replaced. Not possessed, not haunted, swap, and if I didn't find a way back soon, I wasn't just going to be forgotten, I was going to be buried alive for real again. I didn't care anymore about what was real or imagined. I just knew I wasn't going to let the ground claim me a second time, not without a fight. So I waited until the fake funeral ended, until the strangers drifted off like shadows in mist. And under the cloak of a moonless night, I took the shovel from the maintenance shed and returned to plot 13, to the grave marked with my name, and I started to dig. Every shovelful of dirt felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but I kept going even as the wind picked up and began hissing my name, not Eliza, more like the house, the trees, even the soil itself was trying to convince me that I'd never been anything else. My hands blistered, my breath turned shallow, and just when I thought I'd collapse, the metal tip of the shovel struck. I dropped to my knees and clawed the rest of the dirt away with my bare hands, exposing the coffin's lid, already cracked slightly down the middle like it had been pried open once before or tried to open itself. I hesitated only a second before yanking it back, and what I saw inside didn't make sense. It wasn't just a corpse, it was a body in stasis. Not rotting, not preserved, but alive. In the worst possible way. The skin was my skin, the face was mine, but contorted in a grimace of silent screaming. The eyes were closed, fluttering, twitching, and the chest was moving. Slow, shallow breaths. My body, my real one, was trapped, sleeping in death's costume, while I walked above ground like a shadow, without substance. I reached inside and touched the skin, and instantly a violent tremor shot through me like static or lightning. A memory not my own slammed into my skull. Being lowered into this grave in 1908, clutching the red string cross, whispering, "Return me when ready," in a language I don't know, but understood. I reeled back, then her voice filled the air. Again, mirrors, not from the house, not from a mirror, but from inside the coffin, cold around my own tongue. "You opened the gate, you gave me breath, only one of us can exhale." The body's eyes shot open, my eyes, but glassy blood shot soulless, and from inside the grave she smiled slowly with hunger. That's when I realized I hadn't come here to save myself, I'd come here to trap her back inside. But I'd already dug the hole wide enough. For meth grave wasn't just a pit, it was a portal, a doorway that blurred the line between life and death, identity and memory. And as I stared into my own open eyes inside that coffin, I understood the truth. This wasn't a haunting, and I wasn't the victim of some curse, I was the consequence. The payment Eliza Vorn had waited 116 years to collect, and the instant I touched the edge of the coffin, her voice returned. But this time it wasn't hollow or echoing, it was inside my own skull, weaving through the folds of my memory like a snake nesting in my brain. "You woke me, now bury what's left." I tried to scream, to run, but I was frozen in place, the earth around my feet tightening like hands pulling me back into the soil. And then the world shifted, the trees vanished, the stars blinked out, and I was standing in a mirror of the cemetery, except everything was wrong. The graves were dug up, not down. The chapel was upside down, hanging from the sky like a rotting chandelier, and every tombstone had my name, each one with a different date of death. I turned panicked and found her, Mara, wearing my face, still standing barefoot in a white gown stained with dirt, her eyes gleaming like glass marbles. And she raised a hand toward me, not to harm, but to offer. In her palm was the red string cross, the one I first saw above her unmarked grave. "You want it back," she whispered, "then say it, say you are me." I refused. I screamed that I was Eliza, that I had never been her, that she could keep whatever ghost of a life she had stolen as long as I got mine back. But that was the final test, because the more I resisted, the more the world around me began to decay, like even reality had grown tired of pretending I still belonged. The sky peeled open like torn paper. The graves erupted with grasping arms and faces of people I almost recognized, friends, teachers, strangers, who must have forgotten me long ago. I collapsed to my knees, begging for something, anything, and Mara knelt beside me. She whispered into my ear, "Then you choose breath or name." I didn't understand until I saw my body again above the ground, walking, smiling, laughing with someone outside. The gate, living my life, using my face, but with her name. If I reclaimed my breath, I would live. But no one would remember me. No one would ever say Eliza Vorn again. If I took back my name, I would become what she was, a whisper, a memory buried beneath soil, shadow seen in glass. In the end, I chose breath, and when I opened my eyes, I was above ground again, lying on the steps of the chapel, gasping like a newborn. But I knew something was wrong. The air smelled different, the wind no longer called my name, because now it wasn't mine anymore. They say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. But that's not true. The real horror is when you live and none of that life belongs to you anymore. When every memory you carry is real, but every record of your existence is gone, like someone wiped you out from the world's memory, but left you behind to remember it all. And that's exactly what happened. When I woke up on the chapel steps, lungs aching, nails cracked, blood in my mouth, but alive, truly alive. And yet the moment I stumbled to the gate and flagged down a passing car, everything felt shifted, like I had been stitched back into a different version of the world. The woman who picked me up didn't recognize my face, even though she was the same paramedic who treated me after my first escape from the grave. When I told her my name, Eliza Vorn, she paused, looked at her clipboard, and said, "That's not what it says here." My ID, now magically restored to my wallet, read Mara Eliza Vorn again, as if the name had followed me like a disease. But no matter how many people I spoke to, the police, the local news station, even Claire, my sister, no one remembered Eliza without Mara in every system, every file, every face. I was the wrong person in my own body. I tried to go home, but my apartment key no longer worked. A different woman lived there. When I confronted her, she screamed and called the cops. My email password had changed. My birth certificate had been edited. It's like the universe had updated itself to reflect her version of me, the one who came back instead of stayed buried. And the mirrors, oh God, the mirrors, they still show her. Sometimes when the lights flicker, when the faucet runs too long, when I blink too slow, Mara standing just behind me, not angry, just watching, waiting. Maybe she knows what I did, that I chose breath over name, that I'm just a shell, now animated, but anonymous. And sometimes when I sleep, I dream of the coffin again, not closed, open, beckoning, like it's still waiting for someone to take their rightful place. Maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe names matter more than life, but now it's too late. I'm alive, but I've been forgotten, erased, replaced. So if you hear humming outside your window one night, don't answer it, don't follow it, don't look in the mirror, because she's still out there, wearing my name, and next time, she might be wearing yours. Thank you for experiencing this psychological horror journey through I was buried alive in someone else's grave. If this story made your spine tingle or made you question your own reflection, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who loves a deep, twisted horror story. Comment below, would you choose your breath or your name?